patience. I mean, think about it. In the face of slander, threats, even physical violence, how do you endure that? Well, this single verse, revealed in 7th century Makkah, it became the bedrock for a movement that would, literally, change the world. And this wasn't a call to just sit back and take it. No, this was a call for a kind of powerful strategic endurance. Let's explore how this one command really shaped the course of history.
So today we're diving deep into the early days of Islam in Makkah. This was a time of just intense trials and absolutely extraordinary faith. It's a story of how a divine message was met with the most brutal opposition and how that community was forged in, well, a crucible of persecution.
You see, from the very moment Prophet Muhammad began to share his message, the powerful Quraish tribe, the rulers of Mecca, they saw him as a major threat to their power, to their traditions, to their whole way of life. So they launched this relentless campaign of mockery and persecution, hoping they could just stamp it out before his influence could grow.
But here's the crazy thing. That whole slander campaign, it totally backfired. Instead of retreating or getting quiet, the Prophet became even more determined. He'd go right to the masjid, the very heart of Makkah, and recite the Quran out loud, looking for anyone with an open mind. His response to all that hostility wasn't silence, it was greater resolve.
And you have to understand, this steadfastness, it wasn't just a personal choice he made. It was a divine command. The message was crystal clear: endure, be patient, and trust in the command of your Lord. And let me tell you, this principle of patient submission was about to be tested in ways that are, frankly, almost impossible for us to imagine.
So it wasn't long before all the psychological pressure and the name-calling, it escalated. It turned into direct physical threats. The opposition was about to get a whole lot more dangerous. And that really brings us to the key question that defined this whole period. How far would his enemies really go to stop him? The answer is pretty shocking.
So you have this guy, Abu Jahl, one of the most hostile leaders of the Quraysh. He sees the Prophet praying near the Kaaba, and he makes this incredibly arrogant and violent pledge right in front of all his friends. He was going to physically assault the Prophet during his prostration, the most sacred and vulnerable part of the prayer. But as Abu Jahl marched over to do it, he just stopped. He turned around and retreated in absolute terror. When his buddies asked him what on earth happened, this was his reply. He said he saw an uncrossable barrier of fire, of horror, and something he could only describe as wings. And later, the Prophet himself confirmed that what Abu Jahl saw was a very real, divine intervention. He said if Abu Jahl had taken just one more step, he would have been literally torn apart by angels. An unseen protection had just made itself terrifyingly visible. But the attacks kept coming, and they shifted from pure violence to just pure humiliation. In one of the most infamous incidents, while the Prophet was again prostrating in prayer, a man named Uqba, egged on by the other leaders, took the disgusting, filthy entrails of a slaughtered camel and just dumped them all over his back. And they laughed. They laughed so hard they were falling over each other. All while the Prophet remained in his prostration, he couldn't even get up under the weight, until his young daughter Fatima ran out and cleaned it all off of him. This act of profound disrespect, well, it was a turning point. The patience that had been commanded for so long was now going to be paired with a prayer for divine justice. As soon as the filth was gone, the Prophet completed his prayer. Then he stood up, and in that moment of just quiet dignity, he raised his hands and he prayed specifically against the men who had done this. And you know what? The laughter stopped. The Quraysh were actually disturbed because they had a belief that prayers made in Mecca were always answered. And this is the crucial part. It wasn't some vague prayer. No, he named them one by one, the ringleaders of the persecution, including Abu Jahl, of course, and Uqba, the man who had actually thrown the entrails. 7 names sealed by a prayer. Years later, that prayer was answered in the most stark and direct way you can imagine. An eyewitness, one of the Prophet's companions, confirmed that he saw every single one of the men named in that prayer lying dead on the battlefield of Badr. Their bodies were then dragged and thrown into a dry well. A final, humiliating end. Now you have to understand, amidst all of this hatred, there was an equally powerful force at play. And that was the profound love and the unwavering loyalty of the Prophet's companions, who often took the worst of the violence themselves.
I mean, just take the story of Abu Bakr, the Prophet's closest friend. In one incident, he was beaten so viciously by Utbah ibn Rabia, yep, one of the same men from the prayer, that his face was swollen beyond recognition. They just left him for dead.
His family managed to get him home, but he was drifting in and out of consciousness all day long. When he finally came to, his first thoughts, his very first words, they weren't about his pain or even about his own survival. That was it. That was the only thing that mattered to him. Before asking for a sip of water, before even acknowledging his own life-threatening injuries, his only concern was for the safety of his friend. That one question, it just says everything about the depth of his love and loyalty. And he didn't stop there. He actually swore an oath. Despite his extreme weakness, his severe injuries, he refused all food and all water until he could be taken to see the Prophet and know with his own eyes that he was safe. It's just an unbelievable display of devotion. So all of this, the years of persecution, the constant threats, and the incredible faith of these early Muslims, it was all heading towards one pivotal moment that would change their destiny forever. The situation in Makkah eventually just reached a breaking point. The hostility finally culminated in a coordinated plot by all the Quraysh leaders to assassinate the Prophet in his own home. This is what forced the migration, the hijrah, to the city of Medina. And that marked the end of the Meccan period and the beginning of a whole new dawn. So, after all of this, the suffering, the patience, the divine interventions, the unwavering loyalty, what's the ultimate takeaway here? What is the core message of this entire incredible saga? Well, it's maybe best summed up by this verse. It's a reminder that this trial was part of a timeless pattern, something faced by all the prophets. And it leaves us with this profound duality to think about, that the ultimate reality of God includes both immense forgiveness for those who seek it, and also a just, painful reckoning for those who persist in oppression. It's a final thought on that delicate, powerful balance between mercy and justice.